Hi everyone, I'm thriller author j.f.penn and I'm here in Berlin with award-winning and best-selling author Rebecca Cantrell. Hi Becky!
Hi, thanks for coming all the way out to Berlin to interview me.
Oh, no worries, it's so exciting. So hi Becky, tell us a bit about you and about your writing background.
So I just moved here from Hawaii about a year ago, and I lived in Hawaii for 10 years where it was sunshine and perpetual summer. And I'm here with the lovely blue skies of Berlin. And one of the reasons I moved here is because I write a series of novels set in Berlin in the 1930s. The main character is named Hannah Vogel, and the first book is called A Trace of Smoke. And it's set in 1931, right before Germany was lost to the Nazis. And so when I moved here, I'm able to kind of walk in her footsteps and see what she saw, although, of course, a lot of it was destroyed during the war, and so a lot of it I'm just recreating. But like if you look at the building behind me, that's the Berliner Dom. That's been around for a very, very long time. And it's just an amazing sense of history that the whole city has. And because it's been knocked down in various wars and built back up, there's a tremendous layer of history that's gone and history that's come back. And you can kind of see the weight of history on this one city, for me, more than anywhere else. And that's why I'm here.
What drove you to write about the kind of emotional and trauma side of Nazi Germany?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to do was show that it's not this giant monolithic war machine that we've kind of seen everywhere, but that it was real people with real lives going about their day. So Hannah Vogel is a woman, and I think that's something we don't see a lot of, unfortunately, when we hear about the Nazi times. And so she is a crime reporter, and it starts out before Germany has fallen to the Nazis. So the Nazi party's there, they're winning votes in parliament, but it is by no means certain to anyone that they're going to take over and what's going to happen afterwards. And so in the first one, Hannah is investigating the murder of her brother. So he's a gay cabaret singer. And Berlin in the 1920s was this giant gay mecca, and they had a very, very large subculture there. So for example, there were more gay magazines in Berlin in the 20s than there were in New York in the 70s. And they had gay bars, and they had gay rights movements, and unfortunately there were all these petitions for gay rights. And then when the Nazis came to power, unfortunately they looked up those names to send people off to concentration camps. So for me, it was this giant, vibrant world that was gone within just a period of a few months, in 1933, 1934, and would take years and years to come back. So when I lived here in the 80s, the wall was still up, and history was kind of very present in Berlin. And you can't really see here, but if you were here, you could look at these buildings and you can see the bullet holes that were left by the Russian artillery coming into Berlin. And back then, this was East Germany, so there were these just piles of rubble over there where the wall was, and you could kind of see how they'd lost the war and how history had shaped every single thing. Because we were inside of a walled city, inside of the communist East Germany. So it was this very strange atmosphere. And I had a host brother there who was gay. And we used to go out, we were in high school, and we would go out dancing, and there was this place called the Metropole, and it was gay and straight. So I would dance with my guys, and he would dance with his guys, and we would catch the night bus back home together. And nothing happened. I don't think, I know I didn't even kiss a guy, and I don't think he actually did either. But when I went to Dachau, and I went to the concentration camps, and I saw, I saw the pink triangle on the wall there. And I realized for the first time that, what he was doing, going out and just dancing, would have sent him to a concentration camp 50 years before, and he would have died. And that was just a huge moment for me as a teenager. And it kind of stuck with me, and that's why the first book deals with what that world was that was lost.
Yeah, so you wrote these historical books about Berlin whilst living in Hawaii. So what's your research process like?
Well, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. But, what I first did was I got a lot of primary source material from the time. So there were just a bunch of diaries that were written by people who lived in Berlin in the 1930s that were published later. Berlin was a center of film, so there were a lot of movies that were filmed in 1931. So I could walk down the streets that Hannah had walked down through those movies. So like M with Peter Lorre was filmed here in 1931, came out in 1931. The Three-Penny Opera by Bertolt Brecht, the film version was also filmed here, also with Peter Lorre, strangely enough. And So there was a wealth of actual pictures and film footage and diaries and newspapers from the time that I could read. So on eBay, which is like my secret guilty pleasure, I got a giant bound version of a 6-month period of newspapers from 1931, and that's why I chose to set the book at that time period, because I had access to the ads and the articles and the jokes and the crossword puzzles and kind of this whole world that Hannah was immersed in.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, yeah. But it's fun. I love to research, so it's not onerous at all.
Okay, and then changing tack, you
Okay.
have the Blood Gospel
Yes.
out with James Rollins. Tell us about that book and that series.
Well, there's a lot of research that goes into that too, meeting vampires. I actually have been to a couple of vampire bars in Los Angeles. So I did I did look into that subculture a little. But so that one, I met James Rollins he was at the Maui Writers Conference, and my first book had just been accepted for publication, and so I asked him to blurb it for me, which he very kindly did. And then we kind of stayed in touch through International Thriller Writers, which is an organization that we're both part of, and I did various projects for them, as did he. And so he called me up kind of totally out of the blue and said, "Do you want to write a book?" And then I said, "Okay, sure, what's it about?" And he's like, "Well, I can't tell you, it's confidential." And then there's this long pause, and I'm like, "Okay, can you answer yes or no questions?" And then he just said, "Fine," and just told me the whole idea behind it. And it was such a fascinating idea. So it was based on the idea that there was an order within the Catholic Church of vampires, and they lived called strigoi, and they lived by drinking sanctified wine. So when the wine becomes transubstantiated into the blood of Christ, they can drink it and they can receive sustenance from that. And so that was kind of the core of one of these priests of the Order of the Sanguines starts off on this adventure, and he meets up with an archaeologist and a soldier, and they're part of this ancient prophecy looking for this book that's written in Christ's own hand and in Christ's own blood, and that kind of drives the story.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. I've read it.
Thank you.
So it's really, really good. It's fantastic. Quite different to your usual stuff.
It is. Well, there's a lot more action and adventure and sword fights and stuff like that. But I've been steeped in that as well. The Hannah books obviously don't have much sword fighting, although there is fencing in the third one. But I love a good action adventure story as much as anyone else, and I was kind of doing the gothic kind of backdrop was what I was focusing on those books.
Okay, so you also have Innocent Blood coming out. Tell us about that.
Innocent Blood is the second one in the series, and in that book they're searching for someone called the First Angel, and the First Angel is the one who needs to be uncovered in order for humans to have a chance in this kind of war, this heavenly war that's coming up. And so they spend the book searching for this person or this embodiment of an angel. And it takes place all over. It's set in Rome, of course. We can't seem to get away from Rome. But also in Florence, and there's an oil rig off the coast of Naples where it is, and then they travel to various international locations searching for it, with much action, of course. And many things blow up and fall down. So I'll first draft something, and then Jim will come in and just, reduce it to teeny tiny splinters. Yes. He can't resist.
You also have something really interesting, quite different, called The World Beneath. Tell us about that.
That's a new series that I'm working on my own, and the main character is someone named Joe Tesla, and he's a software millionaire who is about to go to the NASDAQ to ring the bell for his company to go public when he is stricken by agoraphobia and can't leave the building. And luckily for him, he's in the Hyatt Hotel, which is connected through an inside passageway to Grand Central Station. And he uncovers this house that's built deep underneath Grand Central Station that was created for the man who developed the tunnel system and his family to live in. And so he moves into this Victorian house and solves crimes without ever going outside in this kind of tunnel network.
Sounds very cool.
It was a lot of fun. There's a lot down there. There's hundreds of miles of tunnels. There's subway tunnels and steam tunnels and sewage tunnels. And then before the subway system was kind of codified into what it is now, there were competing subway systems. So there are tunnels that go to subways that haven't run for 100 years that are still there.
Cool.
Yeah.
You've written so many different types of books. What are the themes that keep coming up and that obsess you in your writing?
That's a tough one. I think justice the idea that justice will be done, justice will be restored. I like telling the historical stories that we don't know yet. So in the Hannah Vogel books, a lot of the times it's the story behind the history, where you get to know what women were doing or what children were doing or who the non-famous people were who died. And I like bringing that out to the light.
And what's your writing process like? So how do you spend your writing days and, cafes, whatever? How do you do that?
I do. I'm actually a very veteran cafe writer. So I get up in the morning, send my son off to school, and then I have a series of cafes that I write in. And so I go into a cafe and make sure they have an electrical outlet and kind of a balance between too quiet and too loud. And of course, since I live in Berlin-Mitte, there's a ton of cafes that fit the bill, and I kind of wander around between all of them.
And who do you read for pleasure?
Well, right now, I read a lot. Right now I'm reading Dr. Sleep by Stephen King, of course. I'm about 90% through, and it's just like at the exciting part. And I was reading it on the train back from Dresden. I'm hoping I would get done before we arrived, but I didn't make it. Because I read The Shining, of course, when I was a teenager, and it terrified me. And I was working cleaning motel rooms in a hotel in a mountainous, piney area, just like the Overlook Hotel, and I was terrified that whole summer. And so I'm reading that now. And then I've been reading a lot of classic stuff. So I'm also reading Farewell, My Lovely. I just finished The Big Sleep again, and I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd again to kind of see how she set that up. And then I read a lot of just nonfiction history stuff.
So where can people find you and your books online?
Well, my website is www.rebeccacantrell.com. And then I have I'm on Facebook, of course, and Rebecca Cantrell author, and I'm on Twitter, Rebecca Cantrell. And my books are all available at Amazon or in stores.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.